Hello there.
Hello.
I can see you, but I cannot hear you guys.
You can't hear anything, Santiago.
Let me check.
I just added the presentation in.
No, I don't be able to hear. Let me see if it's the matter. I know. Can you guys hear me? Can the three of you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure what's yeah.
Any better, Santiago? Can you hear? Did not see it.
Santiago, is that working any better? Hey, it's not.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, give me one moment. Hello? Hi, is this
Santiago, try yeah, I was about to suggest the same thing.
He can't hear us, so you
I
can't.
know. I was like, well,
I
we'll give him advice.
Natasha, it's great to see you. She's busy.
Beautiful profile pic.
Well, so for anybody joining and watching, hopefully if you're on there, you have found the right spot. This is going to be a conversation about connecting the dots and bright spots for IDEA, and Santiago is our IDEA's board chair and going to be a part of the presentation, but we're having a little technical difficulty getting his sound to work, so if you can bear with us for just a second as we try to get that situated.
Scott, you're such a natural at broadcasting.
You know, the other day we were playing a game in our house. Like, if you just you couldn't do anything you currently do. This was you couldn't do anything you currently do, and you had to, you just couldn't get anywhere close. What would you do? And radio, radio talk show person was one of my fun. I would totally have a lot of fun doing that.
Yes, I can definitely see. And now back to this week's interesting stories.
It could be like oldies, it could be sports, it could be, gossip column, Dr. Laura,
Dr. Scott.
You name it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we now invite you back to our regular programming. Santiago was blocked from the call?
How did that work? I just called him in originally.
Uh-oh.
Video.
Hi everyone,
Hey, Natasha.
Like the whole world is calling right now.
It's popular time.
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Maybe we should just go for it, and Sean can maybe help, or Chris. I don't know who can help Santiago on the tech.
I'm trying to figure out how to send him the link that's at the top of this Hangout. I'm about to shoot it to him right now.
Okay.
Because it should take him directly to where we are.
Natasha, while we're waiting, how you doing?
I'm good. It's a crazy next few weeks or next few months, but it's going really, really well. Like this, so like the end of October, of August, and all of September is going to be super crazy. But I get to be in Puerto Rico with you guys.
Here we go. There we go. We're happy to be part of the craze.
I never got to tell you, but congratulations on the engagement, Natasha.
Thank you.
Ooh.
So in the midst of all the craziness, I'm also trying to plan a wedding.
Yeah.
You had quite a fall. You got official
awesome.
fancy coordinator title.
No, right?
Engaged.
It's a mess. It's craziness.
You running for mayor after De Blasio?
Listen, anything's possible.
I agree.
I keep just falling into stuff, so who knows?
I cheer you on. I cheer you on. That's good. All right. Well, let's roll. Let's get going so that we can, folks who are on the Natasha, we're learning how this works, and you have a friend.
Yes.
Yeah, Crystal. I don't know if you want to kick us off or.
Yes, let's go ahead and get rolling. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second session for IDEA Virtual Camp. This session is entitled Connecting the Dots and Bright Spots, an Introduction to IDEA. We're aware that some of our viewers are aware and know of the Institute for Democratic Education in America, and some folks have never heard of us at all. So we wanted to make sure to kick off with an introduction on who we are, what we do, and we want to make sure that we give you a brief history of, where we've come from over the past 5 years and where we're hoping to go. So, passing it along to Dana.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, everyone. Glad to, excited for this new format and excited to have you on here watching live or later or whenever. So we're gonna, so Crystal was just sharing, I'm just gonna give a couple of slides kind of going back into a little bit of the history. IDEA came about, there's many streams of IDEA. IDEA includes, there's as many streams for IDEA as there are people currently involved in terms of the history, because IDEA is made up of people. One version of the story could begin about 5 years ago. This is at a time when a couple of the folks involved in the founding of IDEA, so Malia Dicker, myself, Scott Nine, and others, began to, we had come together over various ways of meeting through education conferences and work, all thinking and realizing we needed to kind of fill some gaps out there in the educational world, in the educational change field, in democratic education. Actually, one kind of version of the history a little further back, Malia Dicker and I were involved with an education conference, the IDEC, International Democratic Education Conference, that 11 years ago at this point now was held in New York, and I was part of helping to organize that. One of the folks who was there is Yaakov Hecht, one of the kind of leaders from Israel, and done a lot of work in education, democratic education. And so we kind of learned from him, went to Israel, spent a bunch of time there, learning about in that country and educationally how they've done some really innovative, powerful work. At the same time, we so came back, and after being involved in various different projects, really came together and were able to get some very beginning seed funding for a group of folks to come together. That included about 8 or 10 people who've been involved in educational work and starting schools in nonprofits, and really coming together to say we need to do something. We need to build a more powerful kind of web that cuts across a bunch of different things. One of the real keys for us at that point, real major thinking, was that across the educational justice fields, youth voice, education for sustainability, even into systems change, social emotional learning, there's kind of all these different silos, yet there's not a lot of places and ways for groups to really come together and to really build awareness of each other and to build some common strength and some common capacity and capacity building for action. And so we kind of began this thought to start to knit a web. And so at the time, so these couple of slides are from about 5 years ago, when we were pitching for some initial seed funding from the Bay and Fall Foundations, and for a first year of action. And so we, at that point, described what IDEA was going to do, and we described it in these 3 steps of essentially framing a message that ties in together these networks, and then build that network, and then very simply, of course, catalyze action. And so we created those clear steps. There was a lot more to it, but the emphasis at that time was that we needed to bring democratic values and rights, human rights, youth rights, into the education field, into the youth work and youth engagement fields at a much more kind of robust and larger way that brings it out from the margins and into the public sphere and public sector to really own public education in a new and more kind of vibrant way. And I'm passing it over to Crystal.
Unmuting would be good. All right, so we always get the question, what exactly is democratic education? How do you define democratic education? Because with democracy, it can mean so many different things. I know originally, some folks thought we were affiliated with an actual party, whether it be Democratic or Republican, but that's not what democratic education is. Democratic education is not a type of school or research-based practice, and it's not one that's learned from a program or philosophy. It's a framework that we use. It's a way of gathering a vast, powerful set of ideas, philosophies and learnings, different school models to help put the public and reclaim the public back into public education, because we know that with it being public education, it should be for and by the people. So we wanted to make clear and make sure that we were all on the same page about what IDEA is about and our definition of democratic education. As far as the mission and vision, the mission of IDEA is mobilizing action to advance meaningful learning and build a more just and sustainable democracy. And what does that look like? That looks like action across the country from folks young and old, and I've been told I was middle-aged since I was in my 30s, but of all ages who come together and work around the idea of education that helps build citizens to help sustain and build actual communities. We've heard a lot about different schools and different education forms where they're being taught the test or being taught different facts that are not helping them, individuals build into being better citizens. So that's our mission. Our vision, IDEA envisions a world where all young people are engaged in learning that nourishes vibrant, democratic communities. And one of the things that we have been seeing across the country, more so now than ever before, especially through social media, is a lot of youth across the country taking action, taking control of what they deem as democratic education. You have organizations like Alliance for Educational Justice, which is a coalition of organizations that are fighting for educational justice, a right to an equal and adequate education. So that's the mission and vision. And of course, with the mission and vision, with IDEA, you have the values. And honestly, the values of IDEA is really what drew me to IDEA and helped me connect with it. We have 10 values, and I'll just list them out. Humility, positivity, people and story at the center of our work, practical action and transparency, collaboration, learning from failure, embracing difference and conflict, place matters, some types of learning are more essential than others, and accountability. All right, so what does IDEA do? Passing this along to Scott.
Good morning. So I'm going to just do a quick tour of things and try to fill in a little for Santiago, who sadly is still having some technology challenges, and we'll hope to get him in. The single best visual orientation to what IDEA does is on a slide that shows kind of values as a guidance system and 3 primary activities, which we're going to walk through. So one is showcasing, so that's where the bright spot language comes in. What's it look like when we're advancing in a positive way, what we want things to look like and be like. The second one being organizing, and how do we connect the dots. And the third, how are we learning about the kinds of changes we're making and share that learning amongst different groups and networks. We do all of that as a contribution to build movement capacity. We see ourselves as part of a larger movement conversation and take an understanding about movements that is about contribution rather than attribution. So rather than trying to take credit for things, how to contribute to an emerging movement that's made up of many different groups and networks. We look at the things on the far right-hand side as kind of 4 drivers. Movement building capacity kind of expresses itself in ways that change the public narrative, change policy, change practice, and change strategies. Again, the kind of root value frame being the origin of that journey. So we're going to kind of run through the different pieces of that. Before we break down showcasing, organizing, and learning, just to take one step back at that movement building capacity, is a lesson from the late Dr. Vincent Harding, who many of us have had a chance to be in a room with and have been touched by, and fond of his idea that you can't make a movement, but you can prepare for one. And this is the idea that movements actually belong to people, and they express themselves at certain moments in time, but what organizations and groups of people organizing together can do is to lay the groundwork for a movement to unfold. And so how do we step up to do that? By building relationships and strategy and infrastructure that can help support such a thing to happen. The first of IDEA's 3 activities that we're going to focus on is showcasing, and I'm going to hand it back to Crystal to talk a little bit more about that.
So with showcasing, there are a variety of ways to showcase the different things that different organizations are working on. One thing with IDEA is it's not necessarily about IDEA, it's about the work that gets elevated across the country. And 3 of the ways that we showcase is through IDEA blogging, through our library, and through tours. IDEA blogging is something that we're starting to do more on a regular basis. We have we have individuals and organizers called storytellers that are actually collecting stories and sharing bright spots about what's happening in their part of the country. We have a library that hosts a ton of information and resources as it pertains to organizations and democratic education. And then we have innovation tours, which are tours that take individuals. For example, you'll see a picture on there about the Oregon Innovation Tour that took place December 5th through 7th, and that was actually one of the first innovation tours that took place. And during these tours, participants will visit locations that may do education a little differently than what we are traditionally used to. I think my first day working for IDEA was on an innovation tour in New York, and I learned a lot from visiting the different schools and campuses and community centers that practice democratic education, being able to highlight those bright spots and give different individuals different ideas on how to promote democratic education in their communities was very important and impactful. All right, I think I passed this one right back on to you, Scott.
High five. So, we do showcasing both in person and online. And one of the stronger examples, which we actually have a time in camp to break down a little bit more, some of the best of what we learned from, is work with a year at Mission Hill. So if folks aren't familiar with that, you can go to www.ayear@missionhill.com. But this is an example of us. There's really great work, really, to honor many, many years of history in the Mission Hill community. And IDEA's role is really in helping that story get told. Some filmmakers, Tom and Amy Valens, made a documentary video, and we were helpful in getting it cut up into small chunks, and then ended up being a number, 50+ organizations to share those videos and content aligned with each of them out across a shared network of folks, and doing that online and through Twitter with very little financial resources in the mix. But there's a really beautiful Prezi that takes you through the series. There's the website itself, and there's all the resources. And so it's just a good example of the kinds of things. The other thing to point out there strategically is when you go to your Mission Hill or you go to those other organizations, you don't see IDEA's logo or icon stamped all over it saying, look what we did. You see the story of Mission Hill and the story of those young people and children, and we think that that's us doing our work well in terms of helping elevate who's at the front of the story there. The next slide is a different example of some showcasing offline. Actually, a lot of people will be getting to go as representatives of traveling teams within IDEA and other networks for the Learning Breakthrough series, which we'll hear a little bit more about. But Nuestra Escuela is a school in Puerto Rico that is a powerful example of the kinds of things that we want to elevate. Dana, Malia, myself, Jonah, at this point, many people in IDEA's organizing crew have had a chance to be in Puerto Rico and be touched by this amazing place that's both a school and an organizing center. It's an organization whose mission is rooted in love, but is also thinking very strategically about their role in community and about the agency of young people, and the role of adults to think about how to transform school experiences so that they're in a powerful, right relationship. And it's another kind of just exemplar to point out of the kinds of examples of programs or things that we'd like to elevate and lift up and draw more attention to. Crystal's going to pick back up now. We'll switch from talking about showcasing very broadly to beginning to talk about our kind of connecting the dots side of the work, which is in the organizing.
Okay. Yes, organizing, organizing, organizing. That is the name of the game. One of the unique things about, or attributes about IDEA, is the fact that education, the way that we organize around education, is using different boundary partners that go across every stem of an individual. So, for example, we organize with youth, we organize with school leaders, we organize with adults, we organize with parents. And one thing about organizing, of course, number one is the relationships. Relationships are very important. We've all been part of organizations where it's more so, I don't want to get us cut off from being aware, so I'll hold my comment. But where everything is structured to the point where no relationships are built and cared for. So one of the most important things are our relationships that are based on our values. We try to make sure that individuals that we play with or that ask to play with us, we all are on the same page about what's important to us as it pertains to education and our values, which I shared with you all earlier in the presentation. And then, of course, our relationship and values encircle our strategies, the way we move forward with organizing. Over the past 5 years or so, of course, our organizing structures have changed a bit, and everything that we do is based off of the learning that we have learned over the past year or years prior to. Okay, so we organize both locally and nationally, and we find this important because we have to understand that movement takes place locally to create the national narrative. So what we have is a cadre. First, I'll talk about our National Fellows. Our National Fellows are folks who work in and around education, different parts of the country, who actually work with our organizers that are a part of our place-based teams and networks. We currently work with organizers in the following locations, or have teams in the following locations: Oregon, Minnesota, Vermont, Boston, Jackson, and Puerto Rico. one of the important things about our organizing strategies is that for each individual place, as we've mentioned before, each place is different. And in our values, you know, we said that place is very important. So although our crew in Jackson, Mississippi may be organizing around creating a democratic education or democratic school for youth, the Minnesota team may be focusing on having dialogues with different individuals around what's important in education in the Minnesota area. So we know that it's important that locally the folks that are there, it's not a top-down initiative at all. It's like how Scott says, it's grassroots and grass tops coming together to actually work and move education work forward so that we're promoting democratic education for our children and youth to come. Going more into place-based organizing work, I'm surprised by that picture. That's a picture of a crew of us, from our crew from Jackson, Mississippi, our Jackson team. I can't really read all, but I would love to read the teaser that was put together. We're actually in the process of putting together or updating our website with more information in regards to organizing. But as I mentioned before, the Jackson team, this picture was taken about 2 years ago at the COFO Center, which we'll talk a little bit more about because it was a site that we visited during our Learning Breakthrough series the end of last year. But this crew came together and is working on they all work different jobs and with different organizations and different groups, but they all come together on a regular basis to promote different initiatives and programs that are going on in the area. And a lot of the work that they do is based on civil rights and the things that came before them. This past summer, the crew took a huge role in putting together the Freedom Summer Youth Congress, which was a youth component for Freedom Summer 50th anniversary. So that's one of the highlights that came out of this past summer through one of our organizing teams and crews. And now I'm passing it back to Scott for learning, contributing to impact.
That's right. So we've done showcasing and organizing, and then the last kind of primary activity is around learning. And Dana actually leads that area, and we'll kind of take people through the next couple of slides. As I said before, thinking about learning as contribution to impact, part of what we do as an organization is think about how different organizing strategies and networks across the country are contributing to transformative educational change, and how those lessons and contributions can be shared with one another in ways that don't try to take a forced replication kind of one-size-fits-all strategy, but does try to take seriously the ways that those efforts can inform one another and build on each other, and to keep track of those. And so this article slide shows a success in Puerto Rico around the IDEC 2012, in which IDEA played a contributing role, but is in part about the after action of that conference. So the ways in which the planning of that conference was used to spur a nationwide conversation in Puerto Rico about the future of education that continues in dialogues a couple of years down the road. And so how do we pay attention to why that effort has been successful, what its ingredients are, and what can be shared with it with folks doing other efforts in other parts of the country that are in a different context, but what can be pulled apart from it. So I'll hand it off to Dana to talk through the next couple of slides to give a little bit of a summary about our learning activities.
Thanks, Scott. So this idea of focusing on learning, I guess it's been a couple of years now. It's essentially just more and more risen up as one of our board members, previous board members, Kirsten Olsen, has said that, you know, more than anything else, perhaps, IDEA is really about learning, and in fact that's really the product that we offer a lot, and I think that's pretty right on. You know, really just as we learn that it's not more than we need more than connecting with each other and networking, and of course everything that Scott and Crystal have talked about in terms of showcasing and organizing is so essential. But then beyond that, what we do with those relationships is that we need to encourage and support cross learning and really learning from and with each other. It's because we need to continually be evolving and growing and really addressing the current changing contexts. And so a few things we wanted to talk about just briefly is that as we were involved in things like we've talked about already, Mission Hill and being with Nuestra Escuela in Puerto Rico, and all the tours that we were helping to lead, it kind of, what started to rise up was that there's several different factors we began to call drivers, really, of change that are kind of intersecting and woven together, and that actually the most effective forms of change that actually has lasting impact is when those drivers are all really kind of fluidly working together, and that there's activity and action addressing each of those. And so in the image that we have shown a couple of times here, focusing on those 4 drivers just briefly, the first is policy. So it's really about the way that rules and policy and laws actually influence and support what actually happens on the ground, and who are the people that actually have the power and the voice to be part of making those kinds of policy decisions. So the area of policy. The second area, pretty straightforward but really important, is actually the area of practice. So what actually happens day in, day out with young people, with educators, teachers, parents, community members. Practice includes all of that. And then what we've talked about a bunch here in terms of, especially with the like the Mission Hill videos and other active kind of narrative work, is that there's actually public narrative itself is a real driver of change. The fact of the ability to influence public opinion and influence how people see and understand the issues, and how we can kind of frame what is actually happening is really crucial. And then the fourth driver of change then is what we call strategy, which really kind of is all about how do we all move together? How do we build relationships? How do we work together? How do we have some coordinated and cohesive work? And so those are the 4 drivers of change. As we began having more and more interactions and starting to do projects like the tours and others, what really rose up was that there's a need for ongoing conversation and connection. And we learned and had the real opportunity to learn with Dr. Paul Batalden and others connected with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI, in the healthcare field. What they really saw 20 or 30 years ago in the healthcare field, what that was that it's very similar in education, is that there's tons of research and knowledge out there kind of about great practice, or how things can really work and go smoothly. And there's of course all the practitioners who have tons and tons of execution experience of how to get things done, but there's very little crossover and real bringing together those different ways of knowing. And so in healthcare field, they created essentially this idea of doing that, of a continuous improvement that crosses together these different actors in the work. And so that's something that we've learned a great deal about from them, and have now brought to education in the form of the Learning Breakthrough Series. And so we're now well into our first pilot Learning Breakthrough Series, or LBS. Last year in Jackson, November of 2013, we were there with 8 teams of educators, community leaders, youth, and activists from around the country and in Puerto Rico, including some amazing groups and organizations, including in New York City, the Coalition for Education Justice and Urban Youth Collaborative. There's a coalition of youth-led and youth-run organizations in New England, including Boston Youth Organizing Project, Youth on Board, Providence Student Union, and then teams of our organizers from Vermont and Minnesota, from Puerto Rico, from Jackson, Mississippi, and others, all coming together to really learn together in a 2-year cycle that brings actually kind of alternates learning sessions together. So folks coming together, learning, hearing from other people about what works in their communities, and then helping each other to plan and give provocations and dialogue and support. And then going back out for the action period of actually putting those ideas into practice, tracking and learning and sharing about what happens, and then coming back together again. And then so this goes back and forth several times, and next month we'll be in Puerto Rico for session B of this Learning Breakthrough Series. And the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of, that we wanted to talk about in terms of learning, is that really this need to raise up and learn about what is our contribution to impact. We know for sure that we can't take credit for all the change that happens. There's so many complex things that are happening at one point, and actors and relationships. But we can try and figure out what is our contribution to that impact. And so we've learned a great deal from in the economic development field, there's this network of practitioners using outcome mapping. And so that's a way of actually sharing stories of what is happening, the kind of the little progress markers towards change, towards getting the big outcome, the big vision of what you want to achieve, and identifying who are the key people to help to get there. And so we brought that into our work, using a lot of storytelling, story journaling to share up those stories of those little stories of change, and we build those up into learning reports that we put out regularly as well. And so this kind of shared sense of learning is not only seeing our contribution, but it's actually seeing IDEA in the context of the broader work of education, that there are many organizations, many actors, and trying to see what is our work, what is our kind of role and relationship to that change, as a way to share out with other organizers, leaders, change makers, policymakers, and young people how they also can take some ideas and bring some of things that have been successful in other areas into their own work.
So I'm going to pretend to be Santiago, sadly, because we can't seem to figure out what's happening technically, which we'll hope to resolve for a future moment. But Dana points to this question of, so where does IDEA's work fit within a larger educational landscape? And part of that's a larger question of analysis in terms of what's happening at this moment in time, and why does it matter? And as a very fast version, there's actually a longer slide share that we could put out around, to the extent that people would find it helpful, around how we kind of understand the kind of educational moment that we're in. But IDEA starts with this analysis that that there's really a lot of great things going on, also a lot of challenges and contradictions, and that there's not a kind of powerful, kind of coherent narrative that links together kind of common cause efforts. And so we see ourselves at a moment of transition in which an old order is dying and a new order is kind of waiting to be born. We use old and new carefully, but we really look at the fact that education broadly is at a time of real transition. The 1980s forward ideas of standards and accountability that's captured the imagination of governments and policymakers and the public at large, regardless of politics, is beginning to fall apart. That's visible in a way at the amperage at which it keeps kind of getting doubled down on. But you can see fraying in that set of thoughts at this moment in time. The logic of the standards and accountability movement is that you set high standards, you have objectivity of progress, you hold everyone accountable, and you will improve student learning and equity across the sector using standardized instruments. And we see that as that logic begins to tease apart, some of the spirit of that are not all terrible ideas, but that the way to get to deep equity, the way to get to powerful learning, the way to get to relationship and context is actually a different set of tools and thoughts about what makes for a powerful quality education. And as we look at how the kind of standards and accountability era has not fulfilled its promise, particularly with an overemphasis on measurement and an underemphasis on resource allocation and enough investment, we're at a different moment in which folks are trying to rethink does it mean for everyone to have access to a quality education? What's that quality education consist of? And how do we do two things at the same time, which is to actually get a public reinvestment in education at the same time we're trying to change that model, but not a model that's caught up in a privatization movement that's a kind of overly simple story of kind of technical personalized learning that disconnects itself from community. And so how in that mix, as folks are trying out things, do we elevate a kind of coherent narrative story and practice that puts forward a vision for what public education can and needs to look like? IDEA's view, and Dana will talk a little bit more about this, is that there really is great education going on all over the country.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think, as we begin to think of what is this, as Scott was just speaking about, this kind of this different way of seeing and learning, about the reality on the ground is that, and this is very clear, it's not only clear to us, but it's clear to many people, but not broadly clear enough, is that there actually is lots already happening. So there are, certainly our schools often sometimes kind of below the radar, functioning and doing some really powerful things. in communities, especially in marginalized, or especially important that that's happening in marginalized communities, but often not known. And even individual teachers inside schools or outside of schools as well. So incredibly powerful work happening in the youth work field, and those who maybe are not saying they're quote-unquote teachers, but are youth workers. And so that happens, in parks and fields, on the streets. And there's lots of learnings and awareness about how to be with young people. What is that? How does that really happen? And so while there is that happening, though, there's that kind of sense of, as we were talking about before, silos and isolation. And so the need then, and that what we've been trying to work on and do over this, and we've been talking about this kind of work, but is that what are the ways to really powerfully pull people together in really coherent ways, in really effective ways that they can learn and connect and kind of build movement together. And there's this one kind of quote that and I forget if it in our world, I think actually Jonah Kanner, connected with IDEA, first brought this up, the way of saying it, but the idea being that we've actually been doing this work together for many years, for 15 years or more, and now maybe perhaps we're finally meeting for the first time. And it's great to meet you, but we've actually been doing this work together for many years. And so then our work is to build what is that network and what does that kind of powerful value network look like. And so I'll pass it over to Scott, who is channeling Santiago.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of speed through to the end so that we have a little bit of time for questions who are folks on, if the presentation will hold steady for a second, at least on my screen. I don't know if other folks, it just suddenly bounced all over.
It's mine too.
Okay. So the slide 25, just to reiterate, the idea is that we're trying to build a network for political and social influence. And part of that's understanding that we're not actually trying, idea-wise, is not trying to create a network of networks. We're trying to link and elevate existing networks and promote them, and in a sense trying to also influence them to see each other, to be visible to one another. We don't see ourselves as the table setter or the convener of conveners. We see ourselves as bringing a certain frame, a certain set of values, and a certain idea about collaboration and strategy, and trying to weave that into the story of these existing networks and frames. We think about that sometimes with the language of being a value network. And thinking about, if you think about the music world, the way that promoters might promote music, we're thinking about how do we help this aggregate itself in a way that's tangible. Slide 27 gives you a quick look at the many different groups and networks and systems and communities that are doing different things in response to these same kinds of questions. And how the question really is, how do we get the important findings they're all making to be shared more powerfully with one another, and then to be fit together in a way that can influence national narrative and policy discourse. Slide 28 gives you a very quick look at one way of thinking about that, which is by kind of target area. So you've got folks using very different words and language and different networks of influencers, looking at things from a personalized learning approach, a education for sustainability approach, a transforming systems approach, Peter Senge's kind of soul-led partnership work. Place-based learning has an entire universe to itself, social-emotional learning, and of course educational justice. And they don't all have the same root chord. They don't all have the same understanding. And part of IDEA's work is to get people to be in relationship with one another, to influence each other, but also to try to build a network that can hold some tension. That's not always easy because we're not putting everybody together who agrees on everything. The theory being that we agree on a majority of enough of things and everyone's willing to talk and work out tensions and talk with one another. I'm excited that Santiago somehow made it on here. I don't know how you accomplished it, Santiago, but I'm hoping your sound works and you can hear us. And maybe you want to just take this last slide around what is IDEA trying to cause, and just anything you want to add to this presentation, and then we will open it up for a little bit of questions in the time that we have.
Let me leave that up to you, Scott. Thank you very much, but I'm still figuring how to get to the slides. I'm just entering here with from another account, and I can jump in with the for the question and answer period.
Okay, that's great. So if you can't see the slides, if you click the little, if you're in the presentation itself, as a primary joiner or whatever, the Google Drive icon on the left-hand side will open it up and you can look at it. For folks who are watching, I'm hoping you can see the slides as we present, and a link can also be put in the Google Plus page so that you can look at it afterwards. We've done, over the years, lots of huddling with IDEA to continually think about what it is we're trying to cause, and our strongest statement yet is this, that what IDEA is up to is trying to cause an engaged, informed, and energized majority clear about the role of education in a just society, where enough people and communities in the U.S. and Puerto Rico have the tools, visions, stories, and strategies to create educational experiences and systems that lead towards young people and nations that are resourceful, equitable, and sustainable. Citizens are active, lifelong learners who desire, create, and utilize knowledge to improve their lives and the world. There's going to be a whole session dedicated to talking more about this statement, how we've come to it, and how it relates. I'm hoping that this time has given you kind of a quick, fast overview of where ideas come from, how we think about showcasing, organizing, and learning, and some of the things that we're up to. These last couple slides I'll leave for folks to look at on their own, and we'll have time over the course of camp to break down a little bit in terms of where we're at as an organization. I think best to just have, I think we probably have about 8 minutes for questions and answers for folks who are on the Google Plus page and can post comments or questions there as well. Crystal, I'm handing it back to you to moderate and handle all that, friend.
No problem. So, viewers and participants, if you do have any questions, feel free to put it on the Google Plus page for the event, or just list it in the Q&A. And if you're joining us via video, feel free to unmute yourself and ask us live. All right, we have a question here, and it is for Scott Nine. The question is, how do you become involved with the work that IDEA is doing? Great,
thanks. So there's a couple levels you could think about engaging. So, on one level, as we said, we feel like we're connecting people who've been doing this work for a long time and are finding one another. And so on one level, the simplest standpoint of getting connected is just get on Facebook, on Twitter, join different calls. Over the course of this virtual IDEA camp, we'll have a number of open air hangout sessions, but part of what we're doing is kind of opening up the level of access for folks in terms of, as IDEA's grown, being able to just connect networks and to kind of tune in and listen. You can complete online story journals to share the kinds of changes happening in your community, but it can be a very informal, loose network kind of relationship in which you're literally just kind of tuning in, paying attention, jumping on calls, and listening to what's going on, and contributing your own stories and efforts and engagement. The kind of next level from that would be something like thinking about where you're at. You might connect with Crystal or Dana and say, what are the groups or people in the part of the world that you're in that we might be aware of and might be able to get you more connected. A lot of times there are already existing efforts in your neighborhood or region or area, and if you're not aware of them, how to connect up to them. And also there's a chance that you're in a place where it doesn't seem like there's much going on, and if that's the case, that's where we've built the place-based organizing structures where folks begin to brew relationships and connect with other people who want to approach this same kind of process, in which case we can work with you around how to begin to lay the groundwork for that. That tends to start off on a voluntary basis, and then as we are able to identify funds with folks locally, we begin to build a kind of seed project or team that lays the groundwork for a larger place-based strategy. But happy to engage on that as well. There are other ways to engage as well, whether it's participating in an upcoming learning tour, or it's engaging around one of the kind of different online learning events. And the best thing to do really as a starting point is to get connected with online and through some email and share a little bit more about what's the story of where you're at, what are you trying to kind of cause, how would you like to get connected, and we'll kind of move from that point forward.
Thank you for that, Scott. And it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, but we are at time because we do have 10 minutes until our next session. On behalf of Dana, Scott, Santiago, and myself, we thank you for joining us to learn more about IDEA connecting the dots and the bright spots. And we hope you join us for our next session, which will be led by our very own Dana Bennis on making connections. See you soon.